Ale mnie dzisiaj nosi. Ach, ten bałtycki wiatr.
To wiatr zielonych zmian.
Oh, this Baltic Sea wind. It's the wind of green change.
U mnie się kręci, że hu.
It's spinning like crazy.
Tutaj też najlepiej pod słońcem.
And it's also the best place under the sun. That's clear. We think at PG about the green transition, and we invest in renewables, PV and wind farms in entire Poland. We are the leaders of the green transition.
Witajcie,
Welcome,
szanowni goście,
dear guests,
szanowni ministrowie,
dear
szanowni
ministers,
ambasadorzy,
ambassadors,
drodzy koledzy i koleżanki.
colleagues.
W dniu dzisiejszym i w następnym
Today and tomorrow,
serce energetyki wiatrowej bije z Serocka.
the heart of the wind power industry is
To
beating
święto
here in
jest
Serock.
wyjątkowe dla nas wszystkich.
This event is unique for all of us.
Tak licznie jak dzisiaj
It has never been
mamy rekord, szanowni.
so numerous as today. We have a record. 1,500 people came
Event
here to this event for the first time.
odnawialnych źródeł energii w Polsce.
This event organized for renewables in
I to
Poland.
dzięki Państwu
And it is thanks to you
możemy dyskutować o najważniejszych
we can discuss
dla energetyki,
the most
dla
important
bezpieczeństwa
issues
energetycznego
for the energy sector and for the energy security of our country.
Dzisiejszy panel poprowadzi z nami wyjątkowa osoba.
Today's panel will be chaired
Wspólnie ze mną.
by a unique
Pani
person
Małgorzata
and myself.
Bartosik.
And that unique person
Wiceszefowa Wind Europe.
is
Wielkie brawa.
Małgosia Bartosik, Vice President of Wind Europe. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Dzień dobry.
Good morning.
Janusz, bardzo jest mi bardzo
Thank you, Janusz, very much. And it is a great pleasure for me that Wind Europe is yet again the partner of the conference. Again, we have great cooperation with Janusz and his great team. It is a great pleasure and an honor to be with you here today.
Drodzy Państwo, tak jak mówiłem, nie tylko w tym roku to jest
Ladies and
rekord,
gentlemen, it's not
tutaj uczestników tej
only the record in terms of the number of attendees. We are also breaking records.
Branża
As the
produkująca
industry,
ponad 40%
industry
energii,
generating more than 40%
40%
of energy this spring.
Będziemy, proszę Państwa, i to Wam obiecuję,
And I can promise you that we will continue breaking records
otwarcie konferencji
well into the
poproszę
future.
pana Ireneusza Zyskę,
And now let me give the floor to Mr. Ireneusz Zyska, the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Climate and Environment, to officially open the conference. Minister, the floor is yours.
Szanowny Panie Prezesie, wszyscy szanowni Państwo,
Mr. President,
ministrowie,
ladies and
ambasadorowie,
gentlemen, ministers, ambassadors,
interesariusze sektora energetycznego,
stakeholders of the energy sector,
sektora
and in
odnawialnych
particular
energii w Polsce,
the
w
renewables
Europie
sector in
i na
Poland,
świecie,
in
to są
Europe,
z nami
and globally,
globalne
because
marki,
we have
przedstawiciele
here global
przemysłu,
brands,
biznesu,
representatives of the
całego
industry
świata.
and business
Proszę
from all
Państwa,
over the world.
bardzo serdecznie
Ladies and
dziękuję
gentlemen,
za
thank you very, very much
zaproszenie
for
na
inviting me
konferencję
to
Polskiego
the conference of the
Stowarzyszenia
Polish Wind Energy Association in 2022 in Serock. It is a great distinction for me, and it is even more so that I have been given the honor to open this unique, very important conference. The meetings in Serock have become an important discussion about the energy transition and about the development of wind power in Europe and in Poland, about the energy mix and the most important issues that are currently at the heart of the discussion, not only for the representatives of the sector, but also all of our citizens, all those who need clean, affordable and good energy. Wind power is a very important part of the energy transition process taking place in the Polish economy, in the Polish energy mix. We are increasingly basing our generation units on low and zero carbon technologies. Thanks to decreasing prices in renewable technologies and the responsible and sustainable policy of the government of Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, aiming at ensuring energy security to Polish citizens and to Polish off-takers, for the Polish industry, for Polish institutions, metropolitan areas, the share of renewables is increasing year by year. We also have to say that renewable energy sources are today competitive towards generating units based on fossil fuels. Prices of electricity generated from renewables are at the level of more than 200 zlotys per megawatt hour, compared to fossil fuel electricity prices reaching more than 1,000 zlotys on the power exchange. Today, the installed capacity in wind farms in Poland is 7.3 gigawatts, and the potential for the industry is much larger than that. We have to mention that in recent 4.5 years, the RES auctions organized by the President of the Energy Regulatory Office, we have contracted more than 5 gigawatts in wind farm projects onshore. Out of that, 4 is still to be developed. If we add the 7.3 gigawatts and the 4, maybe 4.5 gigawatts, perhaps in the coming months we will reach a level of installed capacity close to 12 gigawatts. It is an enormous value, and in 2015 it was below 5 gigawatts, and the entire capacity of renewables was 7 gigawatts in Poland. Today we have achieved spectacular development, and the most recent data from the Energy Market Agency demonstrate that the level of capacity in all renewable technologies in Poland is reaching 20 gigawatts. Of course, PV is the queen of this sector in Poland right now, but estimating the onshore wind potential at a much higher level, we have started legislative work aimed at liberalizing the 10H rule. So the Wind Power Act, Onshore Wind Power Act, has been amended, and I have great news for you. I think you all know that because you follow the news and the developments in the wind energy sector on a daily basis. But yesterday I had a great pleasure and a great honor to take part in the Permanent Committee of the Council of Ministers, and that committee has adopted the draft amendment of the 10H rule, and this draft legislation has been sent for consideration to the Council of Ministers, so constitutional ministers chaired by the Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. And we stand a huge chance that within the next couple of weeks, by the end of June, this draft will be adopted and sent to the Polish Parliament. Thanks to this liberalization, we estimate that the potential for development of this sector can reach additional 10 gigawatts of capacity. So by 2030, we may forecast to have the capacity in onshore wind to exceed 20 gigawatts. But that's not all. Here in this room we have major companies already developing offshore wind projects all over the world. And as you know, in Poland we have an enormous potential in the southern part of the Baltic Sea, with great wind conditions, but also excellent geological conditions, allowing Poland to become a leader in offshore wind in the Baltic Sea region. And this will certainly happen. Strategic documents such as the National Energy and Climate Plan and Poland's energy policy by 2040 assume that in 2030 the level of installed capacity in the Polish economic zone of the Baltic Sea will reach almost 6 gigawatts, 5.9 gigawatts of installed capacity. But that's not all. We are still preparing additional projects. We are also investigating the potential that can be installed after 2030.
Jeszcze jedno słowo na temat
One more thing
liberalizacji
about the
rynku
liberalization of the
celem,
10H rule.
rozwiązań,
The
które
main
przynosi ta ustawa,
purpose of these
jest
solutions
rozwój energetyki wiatrowej
is
na
to
lądzie,
develop
ale
onshore
równie ważnym
wind,
drugim
but
elementem, o którym
an
branża
equally
też
important
nie
component
zawsze pamięta,
that
to
the
możliwość
energy
rozwoju
industry is not
budownictwa, zabudowy
always aware of
mieszkaniowej,
is the
budowy
possibility
wiejskich,
to
tam, gdzie
develop residential
ta
housing in rural areas
między zainstalowanymi
where
projektami
distance
wiatrowymi a linią
between
zabudowy była,
the existing
mniejsza niż
onshore wind farms
10 H.
and residential housing was smaller than the 10H distance. Now, whoever wants to build residential housing, they will be able to get closer to wind farms, however, no closer than 500 meters. And it will all be decided by the municipalities and municipal councils, which will have to adopt a resolution on the local zoning plan to determine detailed conditions for location of wind installations. In parallel, we are working on the development of all components and all technologies in renewables. I have this great honor to be the government representative for renewable energy sources, and within the last 2.5 years, we have achieved a significant increase in installed capacity, primarily in PV installations, but we are also developing more stable sources such as biomass, hydro, biogas, biomethane, or geothermal. We are also thinking about building several large pumped storage power plants to stabilize the Polish energy grid. I will not get into details here, because in the opening address you have to say that it is a great event and great celebration for the entire industry. I'm very happy to see the entire industry gathered here. As Mr. Gawiecki has said, we have more than 1,500 people participating in this largest renewable energy event in Poland. I would like to congratulate you on this success. I would like to congratulate all the members of the Polish Wind Energy Association, and I would like to thank you very much for this excellent substantive cooperation in developing best solutions for the renewable sector and the wind power sector in particular, both onshore and offshore. And we are specifically interested in offshore wind in the Baltic Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say that the wind of change in the Polish energy sector is blowing both from the sea but also from and on land. And this is good wind that will bring good solutions for the Polish economy. It will bring increased competitiveness for Polish companies. It will bring clean and affordable energy for Polish citizens. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today, and I wish you a successful conference. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister, for those opening words, but also for your enormous work of yourself and your team, so that we really have this energy, the wind of energy blowing both offshore and onshore. So I would like to thank you very much for all your works on the liberalization of the 10H rule. Janusz will go on holidays and he hopes to come back and read in the papers that the 10H rule has been really liberalized. Now, if we can keep you, Minister, on stage, please, could you please join us here? And let me give the floor to the Minister for Climate and Energy of the Netherlands, Mr. Rob Jetten, to join us.
Ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I'm impressed and inspired by the opening words on behalf of the Polish government. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Middle Ages, many cities around the North Sea and the Baltic Sea were connected by seaborne trade because they were members of the mighty Hanseatic League. And in this way, cities like Krakow, Wrocław, Gdansk were connected with Dutch cities, like my own hometown of Nijmegen. And wind and water fueled our wealth. And today the sea is linking our countries again as we work together to find energy security, energy diversification, and lower energy prices for our citizens. And the war in your neighboring country, Ukraine, has increased the urgency of becoming independent on Russian gas and oil as soon as possible. And while today at this meeting we will talk about energy policy, I would like to thank the Polish people for their tremendous hospitality for Ukrainian refugees. Offshore wind can strengthen the security of supply and drive decarbonization of our industries. And we need new cutting-edge technologies in order to make offshore wind cheaper and realize connections faster. And the European Commission recently published REPowerEU, showing us many directions in which we can diversify, reduce dependencies, and innovate. But success is only guaranteed if EU countries work together. Unfortunately, partnerships have always been the essence of Europe. More and more, these partnerships are focused on sustainable energy solutions for future generations. And just a few weeks ago, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, and Germany committed to a joint offshore target of at least 150 gigawatts of generating capacity installed by 2050. And in doing so, these North Sea countries aim to speed up the phase-out of fossil fuels and to minimize reliance on the energy imports from Russia. And the Netherlands contributes to this partnership by providing extensive scientific, technological, and operational services based on our 50 years of maritime offshore experience. And I'm sure the companies present here today will be happy to show you their expertise. Their home base at this conference can be found in the exhibition hall, and you just need to look for something in the orange color to find the Dutch companies. And of course, we welcome new offshore wind partnerships in Europe and worldwide. After all, climate change does not stop at regions. We are impressed by Poland's efforts to develop offshore wind power in the Polish Baltic Sea, and I must admit I'm also impressed by the steps the government is taking for onshore wind. And developing local capacities is also key, and we hope to see Polish companies contributing to the Dutch energy transition as well. And your ambition have by no means come to an end. And in this way, Poland is rapidly becoming a European hotspot for offshore wind. And obviously, the Netherlands is happy to support the development, installation, and operation of offshore wind farms. Poland has at least one advantage. Your country is much larger than the Netherlands, and it makes it easier to keep costs down. I believe that partnerships are the best way to create energy security and economic development and to combat climate change together. And I know that also in the Baltic Sea region, countries are working together more and more. In this way, they can create a strong value chain and increase the capacity of offshore wind in an efficient way. And the Baltic Sea will play an increasingly important role in offshore renewable energy in Europe. Future wind projects in Poland need to be developed further offshore, and the conditions for developing these projects will become more and more complex. And we've already experienced with those kind of projects in our part of the North Sea. So we're very looking forward to work together. What we need is sophisticated equipment and technology transfer of new foundations and piling technologies, and perhaps even floating techniques. And I'm therefore proud that a group of Dutch offshore wind companies is present here today. And they are very happy to discuss opportunities for cooperation and to tackle technological challenges. I hope this event in these 3 days in this beautiful venue will initiate new partnerships that will enable us to solve future challenges in the offshore wind industry. And I invite you all to actively participate in the interest of a healthy climate, the future of our communities, and our energy independence as a European family. Thank you very much.
Dear Minister, thank you very much. Proszę Państwa,
Ladies and gentlemen, the fact that we're here
gronie,
in such an
nie
excellent
tylko
group of
polskim, ale
people
właśnie państw, z którymi
representing
pracujemy,
not only Poland, but all the
możemy
countries we're
osiągnąć
cooperating
wspólnie
with, and we can
niezwykłe
achieve
cele.
excellent goals
To
together.
pokazuje dzisiaj branża
This
wiatrowa
is
w
what
Europie.
the wind industry in Europe shows. The situation of war and crisis, the largest corporations that have been with us decided,
ponad wszystko,
above all else,
ponad zyski, ponad
above all
pieniądze,
profit, above money,
że muszą
to act,
być solidarne
to
z
work
Europą.
in solidarity with
Wyjście
Europe.
naszych koncernów z Rosji, takich jak
The fact
Siemens,
that corporations left Russia,
jak
like Siemens
Vestas,
Gamesa, like
są
Vestas,
prezydenci dzisiaj,
we have presidents of these companies here,
pokazuje,
shows
że możemy wspólnie w
that
Europie
together in Europe
osiągnąć niesamowite
we can
rzeczy.
achieve excellent
Jeszcze raz
things.
dziękuję, panie ministrze,
Thank
że
you,
przyjechał.
Minister, again for joining us today.
Proszę państwa,
Ladies and gentlemen,
otwarcie konferencji poproszę
I'd
również
like to
panią
also ask
wiceminister
Deputy
energii
Minister
Litwy,
of Energy in Lithuania,
panią
Ms.
Daivę
Daiva
Grybauskaitę.
Grybauskaitė, to open the conference as well. Please join us.
Thank you very much for the floor. Dear ambassadors, ministers, dear participants. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today in Poland and this conference. And events like this, they are actually paved the way for the wind energy in Europe. Also, I'm extremely happy to participate in the conference in Poland, our closest ally and strategic partner. Before proceeding with the main conference topic and being not only a policymaker but also a Lithuanian, it is my moral duty to express my personal position and the position my country condemning in the strongest possible terms the Russian military aggression against Ukraine. Lithuania, along with Poland, is one of the countries closest to the war in Ukraine. And it is not only our duty not to allow the war fatigue to happen, but contrary, supporting even more intensively, including Ukraine's European membership aspirations. And let's back to power, economic growth, and prices. As you know, Lithuania is a small country, but with great ambitions and great potential. And this potential in part comes from the hunger for electricity, especially for our own generation and at the best price for our customers. So with the closure of our nuclear power plant around a decade ago, Lithuania switched from the position of net exporter to electricity importer around 70%. So locally generated renewable energy is not only about reducing emissions, which is very much supported from our side, and speaking about the European Green Deal and Fit for 55 goals, but also about energy independence and security. With this persistence, looking into coming decade and even earlier, we see current reality turning around, and we expect by 2030 to have around 93% or even more of our national green electricity. So Lithuania has big targets to cover our chronic deficit. Our goal is to almost triple onshore generation by 2025 and then double it by 2030s. Solar ambitions are also high, and we plan to quadruple solar generation by 2025 and double it by 2030s. But to be clear, offshore we see as a silver bullet here and the high priority for us. Lithuania is new to offshore, and yet we are very much committed to make it work and make it as soon as possible. Our potential is more than 3.4 gigawatts, and it's in our best interests to explore it as effective as possible. In our master plan, we see at least 4 possible offshore wind parks, and first 2 of them 700 megawatts capacity each to be operational until 2030s or even earlier. At the end of March, Lithuanian Parliament already approved a package of laws for the development of offshore in Lithuania and gave the green light for the development of the first offshore wind farm. All the preparatory works from the state side for the first park are well underway. International tender is planned next year in September. And this year we are about to launch the concept of the second offshore park. So, let me also point out another national regulatory framework for renewable energy in Lithuania, which is currently also discussed in the parliament, and I hope in the final stages. We call it a breakthrough package, a green light for green energy. A breakthrough package aims to simplify administrative procedures, improve the investment environment for developers of renewable energy sources, strengthen renewable energy communities, and establish clear conditions and requirements for the connection to the grid. Even our breakthrough package was drafted before the Repower EU communication, both seek the same goal. So the development of renewable energy and reduction of bureaucratic barriers and speeding up the issuance of permits. We absolutely need more renewable energy, so we want to make it right. So regulatory environment, faster permitting is in our best interest to find best solutions to work for everyone. So now let's talk about cooperation, and an example of strategic energy infrastructure project, the synchronization of the Baltic states' electricity grids with the continental European network through Poland, including the largest synchronization project, the submarine interconnector, the Harmony Link in the Baltic Sea. It demonstrates the importance of regional cooperation and integration with European Union partners. So this gives me hope and assurance of the power of cooperation with Poland and together the integrity. With this, I wish a fruitful discussions today and important connections for the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for these words. The cooperation of the Baltic states is definitely important in the development of offshore wind. We're happy to have you here. I'm sure we'll have some questions during the next session, which will be moderated by Janusz. There will be a debate about energy transition and offshore. At this juncture, I'd like to ask Karol Labenda to join us, Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of State Assets.
Panie prezesie, szanowni zebrani.
President, dear guests,
W dobie ogromnych przemian
in the
geopolitycznych
eve of
mierzymy się
huge
z
geopolitical
niespotykaną
changes,
do
we are
tej
facing
pory wyzwaniami,
unprecedented
które
challenges
wymuszają konieczność
that
szybkiego,
force us to
zdecydowanego
quickly and decisively
działania. Jako
act.
kraj musimy
As a
zastanowić się,
country,
w
we
jakim
have to
kierunku
consider which
ma zmierzać nasza
direction
energetyka,
our energy should go,
jakie cele zaspokajające
which
zarówno potrzeby
objectives satisfying energy
cele
needs
w zakresie optymalnego wykorzystania
and the
aktywów
needs and
państwowych powinniśmy
optimal use of state assets should be adopted.
w tym morska energetyka wiatrowa,
Offshore
już
wind
odgrywa
and wind energy as such is playing an important role, will be playing an even greater role in the future in the Polish energy
Jako
transition.
resort dokładamy
As the ministry,
największych
we
starań,
are doing our
by aktywa
utmost
państwowe
for state assets
były wykorzystywane w
to
sposób
be
najbardziej
utilized
optymalny
in
w
the most
zakresie
efficient manner,
pozwalających na rozwój sektora
boosting
energetycznego,
the
w tym
development of the energy sector,
sektora morskiej
including
energetyki
offshore
wiatrowej.
wind.
Wspieramy rozwój energetyki
We're supporting
wiatrowej,
the
w
development
tym
of
przede wszystkim
energy industry,
morskiej energetyki
especially
wiatrowej,
offshore wind
poprzez wsparcie
energy,
krajowych
by
koncernów energetycznych
supporting
w ich dążeniu
state
do osiągnięcia ambitnych
energy
celów
utilities in
energetycznych
achieving
i
their
klimatycznych.
ambitious climate and energy goals.
To nasze polskie przedsiębiorstwa przy
Polish
wsparciu
companies, with
doświadczonych
the
partnerów
support of
z zagranicy
experienced partners from
planują
abroad,
wybudowanie
are
niemal
planning
6
to construct
gigawatów mocy,
almost 6
nowych
gigawatts
mocy
of
wytwórczych,
new generating capacity
tak bardzo Polska
that
potrzebuje.
Poland needs so much to
Aktualnie
have.
ponad 60%
Today, over
inwestycji
60%
w
of
sektor
investment
morskiej
projects in the
energetyki wiatrowej
offshore
w
wind
perspektywie
sector
2030
until
roku
2030
realizują spółki z
will be
udziałem Skarbu
completed
Państwa
by
oraz podmioty od nich
state
zależne.
treasury companies and their
5,9 gigawatów
dependent
mocy w pierwszej
entities.
fazie rozwoju sektora morskiej
In the first
energetyki
phase
wiatrowej
of the development of offshore wind
w perspektywie
by
2030 roku
2030,
aż 3,7
we'll have
gigawata mocy
3.7
realizują
gigawatts
spółki
of
nadzorowane
installed
przez Ministerstwo
capacity
Aktywów
built
Państwowych.
by
Dodatkowo
state-owned
spółki
companies.
nadzorowane przez
And
Ministerstwo
companies supervised by the
Aktywów
Ministry
Państwowych
of
realizują
State
projekty
Assets are
morskich
completing
farm
projects
wiatrowych.
of offshore wind farms.
Od 2021
Since 2021,
przystąpiły do porozumienia sektorowego
they have been a part
na
of the
rzecz
sector deal
morskiej energetyki
for
wiatrowej w
offshore
Polsce.
wind energy in
Nadrzędnym
Poland.
celem tego porozumienia jest
The overarching
wsparcie
objective of this
rozwoju
deal
morskiej
is to
energetyki
support the
wiatrowej
development of offshore
w
wind
Polsce oraz
in
maksymalizacji
Poland and to
local content.
provide maximum
Czyli udziału
local
polskich
content.
przedsiębiorców
The share of
w
Polish
łańcuchu dostaw
entrepreneurs in the supply chain for
morskich farm wiatrowych
offshore wind farms
powstających w polskiej wyłącznej
developed
strefie
in the
ekonomicznej.
Polish exclusive economic
Dostrzegamy
zone.
ogromny potencjał
We see a
energetyki
huge
wiatrowej na
potential
lądzie
of
i na morzu.
onshore and offshore
Nie
wind
tylko w zakresie
in
produkcji
Poland, not only in
energii
generation
elektrycznej,
of electricity,
ale także w
but
kontekście
also
ogromnych
in the
korzyści
context of
i wartości dodanej
huge benefits
dla
and
polskiej gospodarki.
added value for Polish economy.
Rozwój tych źródeł
The development of
leży
these
w najlepszym
sources is in
interesie
the best
Polski.
interest of Poland.
Z uwagi na duży impuls
Due to this
dla
huge
rozwoju w wielu
impetus for
sektorach,
development of many
już
sectors,
dzisiaj
already
polskie
today,
przedsiębiorstwa i
Polish
regiony
companies
osiągają
and
korzyści z
regions
bycia elementem
are
krajowych
reaping
globalnych
benefits from being a
łańcuchów
part
dostaw
of
dla
local
projektów
and
wiatrowych,
international
a
supply
dzięki
chains for
rozwojowi
wind
morskiej
projects, and
energetyki
owing to
wiatrowej
development of
w naszym
offshore
kraju,
wind in
te
Poland,
korzyści mogą być
these
dużo
benefits
większe.
can be even greater.
Z rozwojem tego sektora
With the development of this
wiążemy
sector,
ogromne nadzieje,
there come
a dzięki
huge
determinacji
aspirations,
polskich
and thanks to the determination of
nadzieje
Polish
te mają
companies and
szansę
businesses,
się ziścić.
these hopes can come to
Są to
fruition.
nadzieje na impuls
There are hopes
rozwojowy
for
dla
a
obszarów
development
nadmorskich,
impetus for
na odbudowę
seashore regions,
tradycyjnych gałęzi
for the
przemysłu,
reconstruction of traditional
natchnienie życia
branches of
terenu
economy,
postoczniowe
providing
i
a
oczywiście
new energy
zapewnienie
in post-shipyard
najwyższego
regions and
udziału
providing the
polskiego
highest share
contentu,
of
o którym
Polish
ostatnio
local
tak wiele
content
słyszymy.
that we've heard so much
Wierzymy, że
recently.
budowa
We believe that the
terminalu
construction of the installation
instalacyjnego
terminal
i
on the
portów
Polish
serwisowych
seashore
w Ustce
and servicing
i w
ports
Łebie
in Ustka
i
and
mam nadzieję
Łeba,
również
and
innych
also hope in
lokalizacjach,
other
ten
places,
impuls
will
rozwojowy
provide
pozwoli na
development
realizację
momentum and allow us to
morskich
complete
farm wiatrowych
offshore
przy jak
wind
największym
farms
udziale
with the
local
highest
content.
share of local content.
Morska energetyka wiatrowa
Offshore
to szansa,
wind
na
energy gives
którą
us
musimy wykorzystać.
a huge opportunity
Mamy
we cannot
potencjał,
miss.
aby
We have the
projektować
potential
i
to
budować w
design
Polsce
and
statki.
develop ships in Poland.
Mamy potencjał,
We
aby
have the potential
to z polskich portów ruszyły
for
te statki
Polish
do
harbors to
instalacji,
be
a
used
później do
for
serwisowania
installation and servicing
na
of
Jako
offshore
resort
wind
podejmujemy
farms. As the
działania, aby
ministry, we are
polskie
taking steps for
przedsiębiorstwa
Polish
znalazły swoje
companies to find their right
w łańcuchu
place
dostaw
in the
tych
supply chain
projektów.
of
Liczymy,
these
że
projects.
rozwój
We are
polskiej
hoping that the development
energetyki
of the
wiatrowej
Polish
pozwoli na
wind
odbudowę w pewnym
industry
sensie
will allow us to
na nowo
rebuild
odbudowę
a
polskiej
new
gospodarki
the
morskiej.
Polish
Dziękuję bardzo.
maritime economy. Thank you so much.
Dziękujemy bardzo, panie ministrze.
Thank you, Minister.
Dziękujemy też za poruszenie tych bardzo
Thank
ważnych
you
tematów
for
dotyczących
raising important
lokalnego
issues
tego,
related
jak
to
rolę
local
polskich
content and the
firm,
role
przedsiębiorstw-
of Polish companies
przedsiębiorstwa będą odgrywać
that
w
will be
rozwoju
played in
energii
the development
wiatrowej,
of offshore wind energy
z naciskiem
sector
na offshore.
with a stress to offshore,
Tym
obviously.
przemówieniem pana ministra
With
zakończyliśmy
this
pierwszą
address,
część
we have
naszego
concluded the first part of
Teraz
our
zapraszamy,
opening session.
państwa oraz państwa
Now,
na
please
sali o pozostałe
join
uwagi
us,
na
and you
kolejny
please
część.
stay with us for the next two parts. Now we will start a debate, a panel. The first will be devoted to energy transition, broadly understood. Janusz will be hosting and moderating
Ja z państwem
this part.
zobaczę się po
I will see you after Janusz's panel, and we will be discussing offshore. There will be the final panel of today related to offshore. It's over to you,
Dziękuję,
Janusz.
Małgosiu.
Thank you,
Chciałbym
Małgosia.
zaprosić teraz na
Now I would like to
scenę,
invite the following
pana
people to join
ministra
us
Debara, prezesa
here on the
Vestas
stage.
North
Nils
and
Debar,
Europe.
President of Vestas
Zapraszam.
Northern and Central Europe. Please join us on the stage.
Zapraszam również pana wiceprezesa Polskiej Grupy
Deputy
Energetycznej.
President of Polish
Pawła
Energy
Śliwę.
Group,
Paweł, zapraszam.
PGE, Paweł Śliwa.
Do tej dyskusji dołączy dzisiaj również
We'll also
pan
be joined
Sebastian
by
Jabłoński,
Sebastian Jabłoński,
prezes zarządu Respect
President of the Board
Energy.
of Respect Energy. He will also be participating in the debate.
Proszę się nie bać.
So don't be afraid, don't be shy.
Zaczniemy od szanownego pana
So we
ministra
start from
Holandii, od
the Dutch
energii
Minister
i klimatu.
for Climate and Energy.
Panie ministrze, I
Minister,
will ask in Polish, okay? You have the translation. Jak wojna na Ukrainie
how does
wpłynęła
the
na plany
Ukraine's
rządu
war impacted the
Niderlandów
plans of the
w zakresie
Netherlands
rozwoju energetyki?
government in the development of wind energy?
Jak komunikat Komisji
And how does the
Europejskiej może
communique from the
pomóc w
European
realizacji
Union
celów?
help you in achieving your ambitious goals?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, for the Netherlands and I think for all EU countries, we are focusing on getting rid of the Russian dependency as soon as possible and prepare ourselves for next winter. And the Netherlands does so with increasing efforts for energy efficiency and also for creating extra capacity to import LNG through the Dutch harbors, not only for the Dutch economy but also for our neighboring countries. And we will double our LNG import capacity before next winter. And on the same time, we're speeding up our energy transition, both on land and offshore. And this has been a huge boost for our policies. We've announced 21 gigawatts of extra wind farms on the North Sea to be completed before 2031. And last week, we've announced the tendering procedure, so companies will now know when we will tender these new wind farms and when we want them to be operating fully on the North Sea. The Repower EU package from the European Commission is very important because it helps us to cooperate and collaborate between European countries. This is not a national crisis, this is an international crisis, and we have to help each other to reduce Russian dependency as soon as possible. So cross-border cooperation is crucial. We are learning from each other as Poland and the Netherlands. We're also learning from our neighboring countries. And a crucial part in the Repower EU package is the speeding up of the permitting. In the Netherlands, and I think this is the same in a lot of other EU countries, permitting for new wind parks sometimes lasts 5 up to 10 years, and we don't have the time for this. We need to speed up. So the overriding principle of public interest, as stated by the European Commission, is very important to make sure that we can realize these wind parks much faster than we've did before.
Thank you very much. Ambitne cele nie tylko w Polsce.
Ambitious goals, not only in Poland, but in the whole of the European Union. But let's come back to Poland.
Wróćmy do pana ministra.
Let's come back to Minister Ireneusz Zyska.
Ocenia wpływ
How
aktualnych
do you see the impact of the current macroeconomic situation
i ogłoszone wcześniej 50%
and the
OZE
previously mentioned or announced target of 50% of renewables by 2040, according to the recent announcements?
i podtrzymywanie
How does it impact
w dalszym ciągu? Czy jest to możliwe?
whether is it still possible to achieve in the context of the current situation? Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with words of gratitude to Ms. Daiva Garbaliauskaite, the Minister of Energy of Lithuania. Thank you very much for this beautiful address demonstrating our great Lithuanian-Polish cooperation on the construction of electricity interconnectors, but also gas interconnectors, because in early May we managed to start the transmission of natural gas via interconnectors, so Poland can use liquefied natural gas delivered through the port in Klaipėda. So I would like to thank you very much for that on behalf of the Polish government. In the situation of the Russian aggression on Ukraine, it is extremely important. Answering the question from Mr. Gajowiecki, indeed, we are at a conference devoted to development of wind power, both onshore and offshore. This is what this conference is devoted to, but this is only a part of the current reality, which is very complex. There are multiple interrelations that have been generated by Russia's energy blackmail, not only towards Central and Eastern Europe, but towards the whole world. Today's actions, Russia's actions in Ukraine against the agricultural sector may result in famine all over the world, especially in third world countries in Africa. And this will imply a number of much more serious problems. And the energy sector is this thing that unites us in our thinking about security, but we need to be aware that this is only part of the entire reality. What Mr. Rob Jetten has said, the Minister for Climate and Energy of the Netherlands, a very important thing, increasing the generation capacity in offshore wind in the North Sea. Certainly, these activities will reduce our dependence as European Union member states, reduce our dependence of energy supplies from the East. But let me digress here. Poland has been mentioning and indicating for many years that we should take into account Russia's policy, this policy that has been using energy as not only political but military tools for blackmail. And let me refer to the words of Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, who has said at the European Council summit, he has said to the European leaders, you wanted to have peace of mind and cheap energy, and you have expensive energy and war in Ukraine. So we need to draw conclusions, all of us, by strengthening the cooperation also in the energy sector. Our activities related to initiating the partnerships and now this already signed Polish offshore wind sector deal, we used our friends from the UK as a role model. They have initiated this model of shaping the development of the market. But we are doing it so that the offshore wind market in Poland doesn't happen by accident. So we do it to make it well structured and organized, so that all stakeholders of the industry, research and development institutions, universities, with the development of new technologies, large industries, large industrial companies such as PGE, PKN Orlen, Polenergia, all those companies who are currently developing their projects under phase one with their foreign partners, but also many smaller companies and smaller stakeholders who will take part in the supply chain. So with all of this, we have an enormous chance to build a strong and innovative sector of the economy, also with regard to shipyards, ports, and services provided to offshore wind farms to be built in the Polish economic zone of the Baltic Sea. So answering your question, Mr. Gajowiecki, you're not a journalist, but perhaps you have some publishing talent. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 29th of March, the Council of Ministers has adopted new assumptions for the strategic document called Poland's Energy Policy by 2040. And this is where we assume significant acceleration of development of renewables, including onshore and offshore wind. By 2040, we conservatively expect that we will exceed the level of 50% of the share of renewables in our energy consumption. But bearing in mind the development and the dynamic development of this sector, especially PV and wind power, let me tell you that I personally believe, I'm deeply convinced that this 50% share of renewables in gross energy consumption will be exceeded in 2030. That is much earlier, and we will reach a level of 50 gigawatts of installed capacity in renewables in 2030. We include here the projects that have been contracted under RES auctions over the last 4 years, but also projects that are currently under development. We are liberalizing the 10H Act, and we are preparing new solutions to foster the development of this sector. And why? The most important thing that I want to say. We have started with geopolitical situation, with the war in Ukraine, with Russia's blackmail. We need to become independent, not only of energy, but also energy carriers from the East by generating as much electricity and energy as possible in our countries. In Poland, but also in cooperation with Lithuania, other neighboring countries, Germany, the Netherlands, those countries who have access to the Baltic Sea. This cooperation can bring excellent results over the next 10 or 20 years. But I have to tell you the sad truth. And this is the result of hundreds of years of history of our continent. Russia will not stop at Ukraine. We need to be aware, even if the war ends, there is a high probability for Russia to escalate their demands and to exert political and economic impact on other European countries. So we need to take that into account, that constant component of Russian imperialism in the European policy, in economic, social policy, but especially in the energy sector. We should aim to achieve energy independence, which is a pillar of Poland's energy policy by 2040. It is extremely important so that in our horizontal thinking we include independence of energy supplies from the East. Minister, thank you very much. It is a fact. Wind power, wind energy is the energy of freedom, and it will allow us to become independent in the future from energy carriers and fossil fuels that we have, at least partially, have to import from Russia. Poland has an enormous potential, outstanding potential, and it is really a miracle that we have areas that are suitable for development of wind power, both onshore and offshore. Our neighbors in Europe can be envious of the opportunities that we have. And I think that in the future, we as investors will do whatever we can to support the European Union in achieving energy independence by harnessing the potential of wind that we have in our territory. Ladies and gentlemen, question to you, Ms. Minister. Daiva, how do you see a possibility to create energy islands on the Baltic Sea, connecting offshore wind farms with power grids of specific countries? If you could also remind us and tell us when will the first electricity be generated in first Lithuanian offshore wind farms? And how do you imagine the possibility to cooperate with Poland in the area of offshore wind?
That's quite many questions.
Only two.
Okay.
And you have 5 minutes.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much, dear Minister, for the kind words regarding the recent interconnector, the gas interconnector, GIPL, that has been launched in May. I think starting talking about the energy islands, I would first remember Lithuania as an energy island like a decade ago, when it meant that we lacked the interconnectors with other countries, which we do have now. In electricity, we have Nordbalt, we have Litpoling with Poland, and the GIPL, the gas interconnector. So these decisions that have been made a decade ago, I mean also the LNG terminal in Klaipėda, this allows us to be stronger as a region now when these challenges occurred. So I think the regional cooperation is very important, and it is of utmost importance in energy sector, which allows us to have independence, and independence in the broader way as a region, as a European Union. Turning to offshore, as I mentioned, the first auction is going to be launched next September, and accelerating, of course, our potential. We're going to announce the concept of the second offshore park this year, later this year. And we do hope that both parks will be delivering the molecules of freedom already by 2030, even perhaps earlier. So, energy islands, I think this is the next thing that we are considering. Yes, I think this is the future, because we have to evaluate the possibility of power-to-X, batteries, hydrogen, and exploring the potential of the Baltic Sea, of the sea, which gives us opportunities and possibility for perhaps other countries that does not have access to the sea to envy us, and that's why we, as the countries that do have this access and great possibility, I think we must consider all the innovative solutions in the future, and again coordinate and make these decisions together in the region, in the mode of cooperation.
Thank you very much.
Did I answer all the questions?
Yes. Full, and we get 5 minutes, so it's perfect. Proszę Państwa, wróćmy tutaj do...
Ladies and gentlemen, let's come back to the Polish Minister of State Assets.
Panie ministrze, wspomniał Pan o spółkach Skarbu
Minister, you have mentioned state treasury companies. This is within your responsibility.
Jak ocenia Pan w ogóle możliwości realizacji...
How do you see the possibilities for state treasury companies to meet the ambitious plan and ambitious targets in terms of offshore wind? Well, my assessment is positive. Not only as an entity managing or supervising those companies, but also as a representative of the government. In the ministry, but also as specific companies that we supervise, we want to develop this area. We want our companies to learn, to acquire new competences, because the potential of offshore wind is enormous in Poland, and we want to use it to the maximum possible extent, both by companies that we supervise, but we want this potential to serve the entire economy. Maritime economy we often associate it with the old times, fishing, processing, that type of industries. Today, offshore is the new maritime policy of the Polish state, much more important. It has been mentioned here several times. We are talking about energy security and thus the security of the Polish state. We cannot avoid the topic of war. The war started by Russia in Ukraine means that the topic that we have been discussing for many years, that energy security is part of state security, not only for Poland, but also for other Central and Eastern European countries, it is something of major importance. And without diversification of energy sources, without diversification of access to energy generation, in this geopolitical situation, we will always be prone to Russia's invasion in a direct or indirect manner. Therefore, offshore wind is an opportunity for us, but it is also a weapon, because by increasing our independence, by increasing our alternatives to Russian fuels, we exert an impact on Poland's geopolitical situation and the situation of other countries in the region. So the challenge for state-owned companies, I'm the Minister for State Assets, but for the entire industry, we need to be aware that it is not only about business. Here in this room, but in our daily actions of all companies in the renewables sector, but we know it's just a name. We are talking about fighting for Poland or Central Eastern Europe to become independent of Russia. This may sound in a very strange way, but through energy independence, we are building the strength of the Polish state, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. This is the responsibility of the industry that you all represent here. And as the ministry supervising state treasury companies, we are happy to be able to cooperate with you, and we are happy that our companies can participate in building this independence. It is an enormous challenge, and I'm happy that we are all implementing and facing that challenge.
Minister, thank you so much. I'd like to ask Deputy President of the Polish Energy Group, PGE, the question. How do you assess the impact of the current macroeconomic and political situation on the wind power projects developed by your group? Ladies and gentlemen, today, from the very beginning of the day, we've heard so many times about energy security of Poland. As one of the few capital groups in a state treasury company, this is a part of our strategy, and we are trying to achieve energy security by providing safe supply of electricity for the whole of Poland. Today we have to clearly state that over 40% of electricity generated in Poland comes from PGE. What happened over 100 years ago is a tragedy. Lech Kaczyński foresaw this, the late Lech Kaczyński foresaw this in his famous state address in Georgia. This is unimaginable bestiality. This poses a huge threat for Europe and the whole world. We will definitely feel the results of it in the fall and in the winter this year, even though we are feeling the results already. Now, to answer the question, we have to clearly say that fulfilling the strategic objectives we adopted in 2020, I mean the development of offshore wind and providing new capacities, supplying electricity from the Polish Baltic. Today it is estimated that 2026-2027 will be the date when electricity will start flowing from 2 wind farms that we're building together with Ørsted, and at the end of 2030 from yet another wind farm, and we believe that this will provide energy security. Completing these projects on time, this is yet another objective which we will surely fulfill. And development of the RES industry, as mentioned by Minister Zyska, is a key component in our efforts to provide energy security for Poland, and it's a part of our strategy. Thank you, President, for this succinct input. This is very important when we have so many speakers, eminent speakers, we have the pleasure of hosting today and listening to. And I would like to ask a question to the president of Vestas, to our partner in Poland from the very beginning. We've been building our wind energy history with us. President.
When will the first electricity... przepraszam. How do you see... To było do pani Litwy wcześniej, do pani minister Litwy. How do you see the current macroeconomic and political situation impacting the condition of wind turbine suppliers, in particular the cost and availability of wind turbines for the Polish market? This is a real question.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Janos. And in order to answer it, I would like to address the triple effect the war in Ukraine has on Vestas and on our industry. The first effect, the direct effect, is that we have to stop our business in Russia and Ukraine. Russia, we decided to withdraw from. We had installed 1.1 gigawatt, 600 employees, and we are in the process of withdrawing. Ukraine, under the current circumstances, it is impossible to do business. And also here, an important market for us with a lot of growth potential, and already installed 700 megawatt. So that's the first effect. The second effect, we already, of course, have seen rapid increase in cost of raw material and transport because of the COVID pandemic. The war gives an additional effect on this. If we, for instance, as we know, 40% of the steel production in Europe comes from Russia and Ukraine. So it's not a surprise that the steel prices have tripled in the course of the last few months. And also on the transport side, bunker fuel cost has also tripled. So also transport costs have gone up. And yes, as an effect, the cost of wind turbines are going up. What we also see in parallel is that the prices of electricity are at a very high level. So that's a good combination. And the business case for wind power is still very, very solid. And then the third effect, and all the speakers so far has been addressing it, the national security topic. Governments in Europe already have very ambitious climate objectives and to deploy renewable energy to fight climate change. Now the national security, the freedom energy topic is on top of the agenda of all European governments and is reinforcing even the already very ambitious renewable energy targets which have been brought forward from a climate perspective. And for that we see in Europe a tremendous growth picking up as of 25. As Minister Jette said, I mean, we have to speed up on the permitting side, but as of 25 we believe that we will see a very steep growth, mainly on the offshore side. Currently, Vestas is getting ready for this steep growth. And to answer also the question when it comes to availability of turbines, Janos, we don't see any problem for that on the short term in Poland, but also not on the mid to long term. We're ready to go for that growth.
And it's extremely important for us. So thank you very much for this. And the supply chain that we create in Europe guarantee us long-term stability and independent for the energy security. Proszę Państwa, teraz zwrócę się z...
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask a question to Sebastian Jabłoński, CEO of Respect Energy. Undoubtedly an expert in the energy market. For me, he's the main guru as far as what's going to happen on the markets and what happened. He's a true pundit. I spoke with you many years ago, and Sebastian always foresees everything and predicts everything very well. So my question to you, Sebastian, how do you see energy prices evolving on the Polish power exchange? Can the wind energy impact this future? Obviously, the wind energy sector must shape the future, otherwise it will not be rosy. And thank you for these kind words, by the way. I'm pleased to have you here, to have you on our team, and to achieve all these great things together. We, as Respect Energy, for many years, we have been selling electricity exclusively from renewables, because our analysis, when we started, showed us that this electricity will be more competitive than other types of or sources of electricity. And when the whole economy if whole economy were to be fueled by Respect Energy, we would probably be having a different kind of a crisis today. We would have a crisis of cheap electricity. Well, however, as far as the prices we can expect in the future, it all depends on the horizon you're looking at, or the time frame you're looking at. To start on the positive, in the long term, 2030 plus, let's say, provided that we complete our investment projects as Poland, that we have offshore functioning, that we have twice as more onshore wind as of offshore, and PV will develop undisturbed, we should have prices lower than in neighboring countries, because we have a higher share of renewables than other countries. It is true that we do have better conditions than our neighbors have, especially our southern neighbors. That's why we should be able to maintain a comparative advantage in the long term. In the short term, however, up to 5 years, the situation is less positive. In 2022, in comparison to 2021, we've become a net importer of electricity. Instead of exporting 12.5 terawatt-hours of electricity, as much as the 3.5 megawatts of new wind farms are generating this in a year, we will export, if we generate enough electricity this year, around 400 megawatts of base load, so around 3 terawatt-hours in total. Now, should this happen, there will be a difference of 15 terawatt-hours that has to be generated in Poland. Well, as a result, the use of coal went up by around 13 million tons. And this coal burning will stay at this elevated level probably in the next year and in 2024. After 2025, starting 2025, when natural gas prices return to levels lower than the coal prices, we will become a net importer again. And the burning of coal will drop by 13 millions of tons. Therefore, in the next 2 years, unfortunately, most probably, we will be seeing very high energy prices, which still will be lower than in neighboring countries. So let's say, from the point of view of the business case and the industry, this is not a catastrophe. From the point of view of households, if they were paying market prices, that would be an issue. Now, in consecutive years, in the future, most probably, the prices will plateau and normalize. And as long as we open up new generation capacity in renewables, we will still be able to maintain hope to have an advantage over other countries in the region. So what's the most important thing now is for us in the mid and long term to stay competitive, as the economy. We need to accelerate investment as far as possible and to remove all the possible barriers to the development of our projects, because liberalization of the 10H rule today can bring new capacities in 5 years, 8 years, or maybe 3 years. It all depends how the administrative procedures go, because we have to be aware that it's not of key importance how much time will take to build a power plant. It's much less than you need for the administrative procedures. What we need as the industry is unhindered connection conditions, capacities issuance. So I have to trust that I will receive this capacity, and I should extremely quickly receive all the permits. Only then we as a country will not be hurt by energy poverty, not understood as the fact that a smith cannot pay for his bills, or he has to buy cheaper cold cuts because he has higher energy bills, but we can face a situation in which the industry cannot manufacture as much as they want because they don't have the energy. In the global energy context at this point, is probably the worst since the 1970s. Since 2015, investment in new oil and gas drills is 35% lower below the level that guarantees maintenance of production levels. Countries that produce the most of oil, that always had a surplus in production capacity over what the world needed to burn in the automobile engines, etc. Today, they have a 0.5% reserve, and nothing indicates for the number of drills to increase. It's all about maintaining it at the current level, and this leads to the drop of supply of oil by 4% a year. So the loss of generation capacity of oil in the world by as much as Russia generates in 2.5 years. And since globally we are departing from fossil fuels, nobody in the right of their mind will finance new drilling projects for oil, coal, and natural gas. As a result, the RES industry faces much greater growth than anyone ever forecast, because we will need to have this. We'll either have renewables or no electricity, no energy at all. So these are the prospects for 2022 until 2025. No, Sebastian has always been right. He never makes a mistake in his forecast. Thank you very much for this in-depth analysis. And I'm not sure if you thought that buying a ticket, maybe you thought that buying a ticket for PWEA, and you thought that it was costly. So please understand that hearing such analysis, it really pays off, you know. Such analyses cost much more. Let's return to the representative of PGE. Represented by Mr. Śliwa. Well, taking into account these inevitable tendencies on the energy market, and we're waiting for your offshore projects. It turns out that this is a be or not to be for us in the current situation. In the current situation, is it possible to maintain the foresaw schedules or timetables for your projects offshore?
At PGE, we do not foresee any other possibility. These deadlines are very tight and very demanding, and our colleague from Vestas has already mentioned the disruption in the entire supply chain. These supply chains are recovering partially, But as it has been said already, the most steel that is needed to build offshore wind in Europe was coming from Russia and from Ukraine. Today, we have to rebuild those supply chains. And that is why those timelines, time schedules are very demanding, very strict, but we will have to meet them, and we will meet them. And the first electricity from our offshore farms that we are building together with Ørsted, will flow in 2026. Next wind farm will be commissioned in 2027, and Baltica 1, which is the most distant from the shore, will start generating in 2030, 2031. And this question also applies to other aspects. Construction development itself is one thing, but the legislative changes and streamlining is another thing. Minister Zyska and Minister Rabenda have mentioned that already. This is about Polish local content, this is about Polish service ports and installation ports. And here, together with PKN Orlen Group, we are trying to avoid overlapping of our time schedules, and we will operate from 2 installation ports because they will be necessary for the entire offshore wind sector to be built, not only for phase 1, but also for subsequent phases and stages that we hope the procedures will be completed and the offshore location permits will be awarded very soon for phase 2. And PGE has submitted 8 applications for phase 2, and we believe that we will receive the possibility to build more generation capacity in the Baltic Sea area of Poland, in order to meet the targets of our strategy of 6.5 gigawatts in offshore wind capacity by 2040. It is an enormous challenge, and we believe that as Europe and the entire world, we can cope with what is currently happening beyond our eastern border. Those supply chains will be rebuilt, will recover, and there will be no threat to the development of generation capacity in the Polish part of the Baltic Sea. Thank you. Well, that's great to hear. So we hope that we will meet the timelines of your projects and projects of all other stakeholders who are here. Thanks to the most recent communication of the European Commission, we also believe in our association that there will be additional proposals to Minister Zyska to further accelerate this work. We are aware that it will be a difficult challenge for us to accelerate those processes, but we already have a plan how to speed up investment processes, and many of the examples from elsewhere in Europe, we are collecting those examples and we are looking for the best solution for us here in Poland. And the Netherlands is a great example, and it's not by accident that the Dutch minister is here with us today, because when working on the CFD system for renewables, the first country to organize a study tour, a study visit, was the Netherlands. And there is no other system like that. It is a great example, a very competitive example in Europe with regard to the support scheme and competitiveness and the decrease in prices that we have achieved in wind power. This is also thanks to our colleagues from the Netherlands and their good practices. There have been multiple study visits organized in 2011, 12 and 13. And we will have another study visit in July to the Netherlands. We have invited a broad range of representatives of ministries to this study tour in the Netherlands with regard to cable pooling. A great example, an offshore wind farm combined with a PV farm, a large project. I will not mention the name of the company, but these are enormous, outstanding things that you are doing in the Netherlands. We want to learn from you. We will visit you in July, and we will try to translate your examples to the situation in our country to achieve our energy independence.
Pytanie do Nilsa.
So, a question to you, Niels.
Mi jako lobbysty zawsze,
As a lobbyist, I always want
żeby nasza praca żebyście ułatwiali nam jako
you, as investors and manufacturers, to make our lives easier. And I believe that Vestas can make our life easier here in Poland. We have been mentioning local content multiple times here in this session. My question to you, Niels, is
jakie macie ambicje
what are your ambitions
wpływ na naszą gospodarkę?
with regard to your impact on the Polish economy?
Yeah, let me first address that from the local market perspective. I want to once more state that Poland has great wind resources. It's really important to realize that both onshore and at the Baltic Sea. And we fully support the forecast of PWEA that, and also the minister said it earlier this morning, that by the end of the decade, 22 gigawatt onshore wind capacity can be installed and 7.5 offshore. That's a very nice outlook also for Vestas. And with 3.6 gigawatt already installed onshore, where we are the clear market leader, it's about 50% of the total installed capacity. And also our vision to be one of the main suppliers to the 5.9 gigawatt, which will be deployed offshore in 25 and 26. Yeah, we have a very big interest in further developing our position on the Polish market. Now, this strong local position, together with, by now, a very qualified and competitive industry on renewables in Poland, and highly skilled labor in Poland, makes this a very interesting country to do further investments. Already Vestas has 600 employees in Poland, one of our bigger countries in Europe, and it's growing rapidly. We have several thousand of employees in our supply chain. We invest around 200 million euro on a yearly basis, and that's the firm basis of today. If you look towards the future, we are convinced with these assets Poland has, that's our interest, that Poland can develop as a hub for onshore and offshore business, not only in the region, but throughout Europe. And that's a thing we are looking into very seriously at this moment. And this is also, an answer to your question. We have the ambition to be part of that journey Poland will also take outside Poland on renewables.
Jednym słowem, Nils mówi, że moja praca będzie łatwiejsza w Polsce.
So Niels, you're saying that my life and my work will be easier here in Poland.
Ostatnie pytanie w tej
So one last question
drugiej
in
części
this second part
dzisiejszej sesji. Pytanie
of
o
our
liczby.
session. A question
Oczywiście
about
do
figures.
Sebastiana.
So this question will
Jak
go to
szacujecie,
Sebastian, of course.
Drogi prezesie,
How do
ceny
you
surowców, węgiel,
expect
ropy,
the
gaz,
prices of commodities such as oil, gas, and coal to develop in the nearest future?
zarazem nie tylko ceny, ale ich dostępność
But not only prices, my question
na rynku
is also about availability of these commodities in the European Union and in Poland.
Myślę, że ceny polskiego węgla
I think that the prices of Polish coal will be stable.
Dobry jest.
He's good.
Ceny importowanego węgla
The prices of imported coal
prawdopodobnie w tym roku nie będą niskie.
will probably not be low this year. Today the prices are above $300 US dollars per ton,
Trudno jest oczekiwać, żeby
and it is difficult to expect
znacząco spadły.
those prices to significantly fall in the nearest future, unless we have a recession. If we have a recession, then we may expect a drop in prices.
W przypadku gazu
In case of gas,
w tej chwili Jesteśmy na poziomach trochę powyżej
We are
80
currently
roku.
at the levels of above 80 euros, and we expect that for the next year. These prices may be maintained if there is no stoppage of supplies of gas from Russia to Western Europe. Of course, we do not receive any Russian gas now, and we are using reverse supplies for our gas imports. So now this risk of extreme natural gas prices, much higher than today's prices, will be in place until the Germans commission their floating LNG terminals to replace the Russian supplies to a large extent. Poland would be helped with, we could use an additional floating LNG terminal because that would be the easiest and fastest to build. This would be the way to mitigate gas-related risks. Once this supply is already in place, let's say in 2024, then the risks for the European gas market, because Polish prices are simply a derivative of prices outside of Poland, these prices will probably come back to levels close to global prices. Let's say 50% lower than today. Let's say about 40 euros. It's hard to expect gas prices to fall to levels below those before the crisis, like 15 euros. And the forward curve shows upwards price pressure. So decreased supply from Russia in the long term will make it impossible to supply affordable gas in the long term. Oil, if we look at the current prices, $120 per barrel, these are the levels that we will consider low in half a year from now. Mainly because this price level is maintained due to the fact that the United States are currently using their strategic reserves, and this stops the stock and storage levels from falling further in the US. If we have a recession, these prices would fall because the demand would stop. But currently, the Chinese economy is locked down, so this demand is already reduced. So here, the news are not very optimistic either. So in the short term, to sum it up, if we have drops in commodity prices, they may only be caused by an economic crisis and a drop in demand due to recession. If we do not have a crisis, then the absolute level of prices will not be lower than what we have right now, at least not significantly. $50 per barrel is not possible. $100 is possible. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Well, we are here to reduce these prices. As the wind power industry, we will try to bring it down. There is no other option in the current situation. I would like to thank you very much for this first part of today's session. We will reshuffle a little bit. The ministers will stay with us, and I would like to give the floor to Małgosia Bartosik, Vice President of Wind Europe. I would like to thank our ambassadors for their participation, but ministers, please stay with us on stage.
Thank you, Rob, for your attendance. I know you have your meeting, so... Wielkie brawa dla pana ministra z Holandii.
Let's give a hand to the Dutch minister.
Thank you very much. Please, if you could stay with us. Maybe, if you don't mind, if you could just move, but if you could stay, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. And if I could ask on the stage now the industry representatives, I would like to ask Prezes Anna Trzeciakowska, Prezes Orlen Neptun 1.
President of Orlen Neptune 1. I'd like to invite Marcos Gallegos, Business Development Director from Acciona Energía, Global Offshore.
Oraz połączymy się też
And
z
we
Danem
also
Finchem,
connect with
który
Dan
jest
Finch, who is country manager of OW Ocean Winds. He should be with us
będzie.
on the screen. Yes, there he is.
Hello. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Janusz left us with 25 minutes. Maybe I can just cut a little bit from your lunch break if we have more questions. I just would like to start then maybe with the industry side, asking first questions to our companies, and then I would just ask for a short commentary from you, from our distinguished policymakers. Maybe I start with Ania. The first part.
The first part of our debate on energy transition concluded with a positive message, maybe apart from Sebastian, who showed us a rather gloomy picture from his analyses, but the message was clear that we all believe in offshore, it is going to happen on time, and the issues we've been facing so far will not have any impact on these projects. Ania, how do you see that? In offshore we trust. In the long term we believe that's the only way to go to achieve energy security, because offshore is one of the more stable energy sources with high efficiency, and in the long haul there's a huge acceleration awaiting us. The Dutch Minister of Energy is not with us, but he mentioned new projects in the pipeline and will be built, but we're talking also about the short term, and the short term, and these are all about disruptions. We heard a lot about these disruptions, both in the macroeconomic environment. Nobody foresaw this black swan, this drama behind our border that impacts not only people and communities, but also raw material costs. The president of Vestas has already mentioned it, but also CAPEX and debt cost. We started Baltic Power with a reference price of 0%, reference rate of 0%, now it's 6% already. So the cost of hedging, of financing, you have to remember that most of these projects are ordered in euro, the maximum price expressed in zlotys. So there are more and more risks coming related to these projects. To cut a long story short, the long term is promising, and it will provide a lot of momentum potentially for the Polish economy, for the energy transition. The corporations from fuel corporations are changing into multi-energy corporations, but in the short term, considering the tight schedules and the dynamic market environment, we're facing many challenges. So this is not only our role to play as developers, but you as representatives of the administration to address these risks and to mitigate them. Thank you so much for your input.
I will ask a question to you, Marcos. What's your assessment of the impact of the current situation on the challenges that we have just discussed, but also on the energy sector as a whole?
Here you are.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting Acciona to this panel. I think that there are three main factors, that are affecting global markets. The first one is the pandemic influence and consequences of the economy. The second one is the supply chain crisis that we are suffering. And the third one is the war in Ukraine that everybody has commented. I think that right now, the cocktail of these three factors has caused an increase on the prices of many products and also in the raw materials globally. This conflict that they have been speaking, has driven oil and gas prices to the highest level in the last decade. So I think that is forcing many countries to reconsider their energy supplies and the energy policies that they have. And this is not an easy feat, because we know that Russia is the world's second biggest supplier on natural gas, and the third biggest supplier of oil. Nonetheless, the European Union knows and is starting to grapple in the dependence on the Russian natural gas, okay, and is making plans to break free from it completely. So answering your question that if I think the high prices and supply chain will impact, the answer is yes in the short term. But I think that the war in Ukraine, I mean, this conflict will be a catalyst, okay, to accelerate the decarbonization process across Europe, and in particular in the development of the renewable energy sources.
Thank you. Dan, I'm coming over to you. Can you hear us? We can't hear you. Can you say something? Hello? I think you can hear us, so maybe I will ask a question, and then in the meantime, maybe we can sort out so that we can actually hear your answer. So, no, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, but I hope we can sort it out in a moment. But the question that I wanted to ask you was ocean wind. Well, you are a key player in the energy transition. You're very active in key global markets. And what I wanted to ask you was a question about the key drivers for energy transition. How do you see that? What is the key driver for successful transition? And I hope we can hear you now. No, we can't. We can't. Look, I'm very sorry about that. Let's maybe move to the other panelists that I have here, and I hope we can do something about it. Maybe Anya, Marcos, would you like to respond to that? What are maybe, and that's very short, in one paragraph. What are the key drivers for successful energy transition?
Well, for me, the first thing will be the energy policy. Okay, to have clear targets, okay, on each of the countries, okay, and having clear which are those targets, also understanding which are the rules of the game, okay, that there will be a legal framework that will be transparent, okay, and that all the players will know which are the rules on the game. I think that the government, okay, is really important, okay, in this task, okay, to be able to get aligned, okay, and to create that framework. I think that it's also important, okay, that the stakeholders will be aligned, okay, that's one of the most important issues, okay, to make that transition goes on a fine way.
No pewnie nie powiem nic odkrywczego.
I won't say anything really new. A clear regulatory framework, setting clear frameworks. I think we have these frameworks. We can be proud in mentioning the sector deal that mentioned by the minister. This is a platform that connects all the stakeholders and leads to the second point mentioned by President. So aligning our efforts, our joint efforts in achieving energy transition, strong partnerships. PKN Orlen is ready to form such partnerships. We are ready to come to the second phase with strong strategic partners, regardless of how the license processes end. We want to be ready to make joint efforts, and we have this added value of this synergy effect. The economics of the projects I mentioned, it has to be readjusted, especially in the first phase, by changing the regulatory, the macroeconomic environment. I won't be repeating myself. We know what we're dealing with, how this disturbs the business case of the projects, how it can impact the final investment decisions and the schedules and timetables. We have to keep it for the just transition to take place, but also to have a timely energy transition. We need to have the timelines because timetable disturbance undermines the belief in our offshore projects and the credibility of potential developers. So clear, transparent frameworks, clear rules, timetables, around the whole table, dialogue and partnerships. These are the key drivers I would list, as well as for me and for PKN Orlen. Now, maybe we could hear the answer or a comment from Minister Zyska and Daiva. Thank you so much. I'm very happy that the best global brands are involved in development of the sector. The partners of Polish companies both from PGE and PKN, are the best global companies, market leaders around the world. The partner of a Polish private company, which is not state treasury owned, but it's also important, Polenergia. It's a large company, important company. It is also established, also has an established international partner. I'm not naming names, but I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about, who's participating in the first projects in Poland. However, as the Ministry of Climate and the Environment, together with other ministries, the Ministry of State Assets, the Ministry of Development, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Science Education, we're doing our best to create a good atmosphere for the development of the whole sector at the same time. We have accepted a certain challenge, using the role model of the UK, but using our Polish way, in organizing the Polish sector deal for the development of offshore wind energy sector. For it to be sustainable, we are not focusing exclusively on single projects. In such a case, we could lead to a situation where many of you and members of PWEA as well would feel excluded or not participating in the development and reaping the benefits of the growth of these projects. We also did our best to take into account the development of Polish local content. Obviously, we would like to cooperate with the best companies in the world to have mature technologies, but in the term of the next 5, 15 or 20 years, after 2030, we would like Polish companies, mainly from the state treasury-owned companies, to have enough experience to build smart specialties that would be like export flagships for Polish companies to work not only in the Baltic Sea, but also in other places of the world in cooperation with international players in other parts of Europe and in other seas and oceans. And I can proudly say that we have set our priorities, our stages of development of the market right. In the first stage of development, 20-30% of local content. By 2030, it's supposed to be 45% of local content, but after 2030, our ambition is to exceed the level of 50%. And today, parties to the sector deal are as many as 231 entities, while we started only from a dozen or so. I remember when we signed the sector, Janusz Gajowiecki was with us, Mariusz Witoński was with us from the Association of Offshore Wind Energy. Today, 231 entities from Poland, Europe and abroad are on it. Representatives of the R&D sector, of the scientific committee and the industry, which is so important because it's the industry which will be giving the momentum for development of the whole sector of economy. This is such an important component. In the room I can see people from shipyards. The development of this sector is also important. We need at least 100 servicing vessels. We have an ambition to join the offshore wind sector with the hydrogen sector, for the fleet of servicing vessels to be built using the latest technology, using fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, for it to be clean and setting new standards in technology in the Baltic Sea. And it would be best for these ships to be built in Polish shipyards, which are already preparing for that. And Mr. Karol Rabenda from the Ministry of State Assets mentioned that together with Polish ports, especially Gdańsk port and Gdynia port and Świnoujście port, they are preparing the construction of installation ports and servicing ports. Ustka, Łeba, maybe Władysławowo in the future. Huge investment projects are ahead of us. Polish GDP can benefit from that a lot. I would like to once again express my appreciation to the participants of the market and foreign partners who are so strongly present here and cooperate with Polish companies, which soon will join these global leaders in the development of their business and the whole sector in Poland. Thank you, Minister. We have a connection with Dan Finch from Ocean Wind.
Can we hear you? Can you say something? We still can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you. Welcome. Now we can hear you. Now we can't. Up so that we can all. Yeah, it's okay. So let me maybe just go to the question about the transition. What are the key success factors you think for the energy transition, especially given the current geopolitical situation?
Okay, well, one of the things I'd like to say is that I think most of the speakers have recognised that there's an absolute massive potential for offshore wind, but there's been a massive potential for quite some time. Some European nations still to deliver any offshore wind, and now is the time to deliver, and that time has been made more urgent because of the geopolitical situation and security of supply. I've worked in the offshore wind industry for nearly 20 years, and in that time we've concentrated on the impact on climate change, we've looked at rapid cost reduction, and we've looked at the value and increase in jobs and potential for local content. But security of supply was always, if you like, put in the background, or has been by many nations. But now is the time that we must get on and deliver. And one of the key factors in this is that we must use the experience gained in other countries. I think the Minister has just rightly said there that it's really important to use the lessons learned from some of the foreign companies, and Ocean Winds is one of these. In Ocean Winds, we operate in 7 or 8 different countries. We have introduced fixed and floating technology, along with suppliers from all over the world, but also suppliers in particular from Poland. We've worked with both cable suppliers and fabricators from Poland in the past, and we have delivered not only to the UK market, but also we're looking at other international markets as well. And this is one of the sort of really key factors, is to learn, not to relearn the lessons from the basics, is to use the experience gained from other countries. Because if we don't, we've got to recognise in Poland that Poland is not the only country in Europe or worldwide that is planning to expand its offshore wind rapidly in the next 10 to 20 years. We already see real pressures on the supply chain, not only due to the war, but also
price of commodities, but also a lack of supply. There is generally a lack of supply chain available for us, and if Poland is going to rapidly deploy, then we must make sure that the supply chain in Poland is prepared. And this is one of the things that we really want to do from Ocean Winds, is to learn some of the lessons that we implemented within the sector deal in the UK, the sector deal, which was, as you say, modified and adopted within Poland. But the key factor within the sector deal is the collaboration between government and developers and supply chain. In the UK, what we plan and what we actually do is we all invest in the supply chain. We need to invest in the supply chain early, because if we don't prepare the ports, we don't have the right fabricators, the right suppliers in place, then what inevitably happens is there's not enough work for that supply chain, and the supply chain sees peaks and troughs and is unable to be sustainable. So what we need is to learn the lessons from the other nations that have moved a bit earlier than we in Poland, but we are very, very keen in order to learn these lessons and to adopt these lessons and to adapt the lessons for the Polish market.
Thank you. May I go back actually to the ministers? I gave the floor to Minister Zyska. Now, would you like to comment, Minister Rabenda or Daiva? Would you like to comment on the previous discussion?
No my tu nie ukrywamy, że jako ministerstwo, ale pani prezes też
We say it clearly in our ministry, and my counterpart has also mentioned that we have appetites to develop this industry in such a direction that our large companies, but also private companies cooperating with them,
może nie tylko w regionie, ale
to be present not only within our region, but also beyond, and to be significant stakeholders in the development of the offshore wind industry. We are slightly forced to do that by international and geopolitical circumstances, but thinking
źródła pochodzenia tej
that the energy sector and the sources of energy are an important thing. We have always been saying that it is important, but today we see it even more.
ta transformacja, którą przechodzimy, z jednej strony trochę wymuszona.
The transition that we are going through, on the one hand, forced by historical circumstances with old conventional generation energy sources losing their generation capacities. On the other hand, we have the green transition, which is part of the European policy, but for us, we have this risk and these difficulties, but it is also an opportunity that we want to harness to the maximum extent possible. And I'm saying that as the Vice Minister for State Assets, but also as a representative of the policy of state treasury companies. But I think I can speak on behalf of the whole industry. I think this is the direction that will be developed in the future, and this is where the money will be. We are at a conference that is a business conference. So there will be money in this industry, but it will be also a development opportunity and the future of Poland, because by developing offshore wind, we will develop the whole of Poland. I come from Gdańsk, which makes it particularly important for me. The region of Pomerania will gain energy sources that will be located closely to ourselves. The development of the industrial development of the southern regions of Poland was dependent on the location of sources of generation. So the south of Poland developed in the past decades. Today we have a completely different future, and thanks to offshore wind and thanks to nuclear plants that will be located in the north, we have completely different development conditions for the northern part of Poland, for Gdańsk, for the coastal regions. You've mentioned Gdańsk and Świnoujście as installation ports, but also other locations of service ports. So this will be the direct impact of offshore wind on the development of the region, but also due to the fact that these sources of energy generation units will be located close to the north of Poland. This will be a development boost to these regions. And as companies, not only as companies who generate electricity like PGE or Orlen, but also other companies that we supervise, we treat it as an opportunity for development for Poland and northern Poland in particular. Thank you very much. Minister Gabrielskaite, could you briefly comment?
I guess I strongly agree what has been said, and just from regional perspective, from Lithuanian perspective, I think the supply chains should be seen not as on a national level, but the chain of supply chains that are coming in the whole Baltic Sea region, and I guess the whole European Union. So I think regional cooperation is inevitable and very important at this point of view. And we are very happy about the Polish companies that are interested in Lithuanian market, offshore market. And I'm sure that some Lithuanian companies will attend on some supply chains developing Polish offshore parks. So from our point of view, know-how and exchange of that, what we are creating here in the region, we are creating the future, the possibilities, and we are rebuilding the economy right now. I think it has to be coordinated as much as possible, because here is not the race between the countries, but there is only one vision that we have, and I think sharing what we are doing today, I'm really glad to do that. I think this is very important for us as a region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are beautiful words. Very briefly, please, because I still would like to ask a couple of questions.
Tak, jednym zdaniem, ja tutaj też chcę podkreślić.
Yes, very briefly. I would like to emphasize, similarly to the Lithuanian energy minister, cooperation is key to success. We shouldn't compete by fighting each other in terms of our market competition. We need to cooperate on specific single projects, but we should also aim for the strategic goal, which is energy independence of energy supplies from the East. Because in several years from now, we can wake up in a completely different reality if we do not understand it. With regard to money mentioned by Minister Karol Rabenda, this is very important for us to start to make available the funds from the National Recovery Plan and the other EU funds that were dedicated, will be dedicated to the development of offshore wind in Poland and also in other technologies, including onshore wind, PV, new installations, and also, very importantly, transmission and distribution grids. Because we know that without this cardiovascular system of the economy, that is the power grids, we will not be able to integrate renewables and use them for the development of our economy, of Poland and the whole of Europe. So this is the necessary condition to make it possible to use green energy generated by renewables. So we need to work in that direction to build a stronger, much better, improved power grid than the one that we have. Anya, we could come back to the topic of ports, if we may. I know that you have said multiple times that the potential of the Baltic Sea means that we need at least 2 installation ports in Poland. Yes, with regard to what the ministers have said, cooperation and ambitions for cooperation, not only in the Polish market, but also in other Baltic Sea countries, we have enormous ambitions, and we see ourselves as a leader not only in the Polish part of the Baltic Sea, but also in neighboring countries, and we would like very much to share our experience and potential with our partners from Lithuania and other Baltic states. We want to have many projects in Poland in phase 2, and I know that the PG's ambition is also to have many of such projects. We coordinate our time schedules, and we know that in Poland there is room for at least 2 installation ports. Otherwise, I can see that you are nodding. Otherwise, there might be interference and projects from various developers overlapping in terms of installation time schedules, and the end result would be a delay in the installation phase of particular projects and for the entire offshore wind development in Poland. PKN Orlen wants to meet the time schedules, and we want to generate first electricity in 2026. We want this energy to be affordable, green, and accessible to everyone. So we believe, that is why we believe that a Polish installation port or ports too are key to success, one of the keys to success. You've asked about the most important conditions for transition, for offshore wind, for local content, for the drivers for the Polish economy. Yes, the Polish installation port in 2025 is key. And for the key to fully use the potential is to have 2 ports.
You were both highlighting the importance of experience, building on experience of key offshore players, which both of your companies are definitely, you definitely have it. what do you, and not repeating lessons, not repeating mistakes, and make sure that we have some lessons that we've learned and we benefit from it. So what do you think, and maybe I start with Marcos, what do you think will help Poland, and very briefly, to really deliver offshore on time and in an optimal way?
Okay, I think that, well, the first thing is that the offshore is a completely new sector for Poland, okay? So I think that right now we have to build the foundations of this sector. I think that, I mean, from our perspective, say, okay, the country can easily get transfer of knowledge, technology, and best practices. Let's have in mind that during the last decade, okay, there have been a lot of development of offshore projects in other countries that has improved so much the technologies. Okay, most focus on the bottom fixed technology, that is the one that is going to be used here. So I think that it will be worth engaging to foreign players, okay, that will make a dynamic transfer of this technology.
Thank you very much. Dan, last
Yeah,
question.
I'd just like to. I'd like to echo just what Marcus has said and repeat that, you know, we've made many mistakes in the UK in particular in becoming the largest offshore wind development country outside China, including ports and harbours. You know, even in recent projects, there have been some real challenges in getting ports and harbours ready in time. And so, consequently, it's really crucial that the investment takes place in the supply chain and that we work with the supply chain, because the supply chain is fundamental. We get the supply chain right in Poland, then it gives the opportunity for Polish companies to expand not only within the Baltic region and the 30 or so gigawatts within the Baltic region, but also worldwide. We see companies already like Telefonica operating in projects, many of our projects across the world, but without the early investment, without them being prepared, it's going to be a real challenge. The sector deal is not only about jobs, it's about skills, training, development, diversity, a whole, you know, plethora of different elements that are really crucial to prepare that supply chain to expand around the world. The Dutch government is a good example of a government that proactively markets the opportunities for its own companies around the world. They're doing so today in Poland. The Dutch, the Norwegian, the UK, all spread the message about their companies being ready to supply the world of offshore wind. And that's what we need to do for Poland, is to prepare them, make the supply chain ready, and then to be able to market that around not only the Baltic, but across Europe.
Wonderful message to finish this panel. Thank you very much to the politicians and to our sector representatives. Thank you to our distinguished audience. Janusz, you have few words just to conclude this whole opening.
Tak, i przyłączam się do podziękowań.
So I would like to join you in thanking the participants. An interesting debate. We have raised so many issues today. It's very difficult really to sum it up. We have touched upon so many subjects today, which are so important. We've heard so many important statements about international cooperation and untapping the potential of renewable energy in Poland. A very fruitful session. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank all the ministers, I'd like to thank ambassadors, main sponsors, participants of the panel. I'd like to also thank you, the audience, for your attention. After lunch, we will begin our onshore and offshore wind session. There will be workshops. You're all warmly invited to participate in, I'm sure, an interesting debates today. Once again, let's give a hand to our guests.
Muchas gracias.